Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be part of DevOps DC 2021. Before I start on my topic, I would like to thank the organizers for choosing this topic. I'm so excited to share on the journey we took and in Capital One and also the lessons we learned. And I'm happy to share the experience with you all. So the topic I chose today to talk about is shift left is the right way of securing your apps. Is it so? Let's talk through that. Before I jump onto that, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Nimesh Bernard, and I'm a director of software engineering in Capital One. And I manage one of the sides of the pipeline which Capital One uses, and we have one pipeline, and there's close to 13,000 developers who use that. And I'm going to share the story and how we did it and what journey we took in order for that to be achieved. It was a fun and exciting journey, and we had a lot of learnings as we went through that. So shifting left, is it the right way to securing the apps? So you must have this question, should I move left or right? Most of us are so consumed by the term shift left. Let me take a pause there. Before we decide on moving left or moving center or moving to the right, we have to answer some questions. Yes, shift left is a fancy term, and that's what the industry has been talking about, that we have to move shift left, move left as much as possible. That's a good thing. I'm not saying nothing wrong about that, but we have to ask some questions. Let's not be stuck with the term shift left, but focus on what we have to do. What is the right thing to do, and what is the right stage or the right place to implement some of the security aspects? Like, what do we do on that? Former UK Prime Minister David Cameron quoted this: I believe that in life, you have to give things your best shot. Do your best. You have to focus on what needs to be done. Do the right thing and not the popular thing. I just like the last line. He said, do the right thing, not the popular thing. So we are going to go through some of the aspects of what is the right thing, how do we secure our apps, and what, as an industry, we've been driving and what we need to do. So let's not get stuck with, should I move left or move right? Before we decide on moving left or not, we need to be clear on what are we trying to solve, right? Without that, we won't be able to decide whether I'm doing right or not. So we have to be clear on what are we trying to solve? How are we going to implement this? What are the strategies we are going to see? So when I say what are we trying to solve, am I trying to solve a cyber gap? Am I trying to solve an SDLC gap? Am I trying to solve a data gap, or a reporting, or a compliance, or I'm trying to improve the developer experience, or I'm trying to improve the stability? There's so many things you can walk through that when we talk about shifting left. Because I mentioned development, a developer experience, that is the most critical piece, because that way the developers are not spending too much time fixing their code, but increase their time in feature development. And also it improves the stability of the system we are trying to solve. So I said, let's not be consumed by shift left or not right. Let's try to understand what we are trying to solve. Then once we decide on what we are going to solve, we have to move on to, do we have the data to decide what we are trying to solve? Before, again, let's not be consumed by the left or right. Let's not be consumed by shift left. We need data before we try to solve anything. So I talked about the cyber gaps. When you say cyber gaps, how do I know this cyber has a gap or not? Do I have the data to justify that? When I talk about the SDLC gap, did I talk to the SDLC team to understand what data do they have? What are the problems they are trying to solve? What are they trying to automate? How can you help on that? And you can say, okay, this is your need. Can we do it in the right place in the pipeline? What stage of the pipeline do you want to implement? So you need to start gathering data. And then there's a reporting, there's a compliance. All these are data you have to gather before you decide on what you're trying to solve. Because there's too many things to solve. It is not just one, two, but there's too many things you can solve. And also, when you try to solve all these things, you have to keep in mind that the build time should not increase, right? As we implement a lot of controls, we have to be very cognizant of what and how, and also, am I decreasing the productivity? Am I increasing the build time? You have to look into all those things and also build failure points. If you're introducing all these controls, you're introducing more events in the stages. If, as you introduce all these events, there is also a possibility of failures. So the more failures you have in your pipeline, that means the developers are not happy. They're not able to push code into prod. So you have to be very careful about that. And then for making a decision, we also have to consider all these data points. Without data, we cannot make any decision. So for us to have a good pipeline, we need to know what we are trying to solve. And for us to know what we need to solve, we need to have the data to solve it. So I encourage each one of you watching this to look into the cyber data, the SDLT data, even the data engineers, talk to them and say, hey, what is that we need to do for reporting? What is that we need to do for compliance? What is that we need to do for auditing? And also looking into how can you improve the build time so that we as an organization or you as an organization are doing the right thing to the organization. Because nowadays, securing the apps is kind of becoming the number one aspect of any organization. You don't want any data leakage. You don't want any vulnerabilities. You don't want any gaps in your system where a third party can penetrate into your network or system. So we have to build a software where we have some defensive and offensive methods of controlling all our vulnerabilities. So moving on to data, next is, what are some of the areas you can think about before solving, right? There's too many things. You can say, hey, I have too many things to solve. Now I know what I'm trying to solve. I know I have to concentrate on cyber. I need to concentrate on SDLC. I have some data. What are the some of the areas you have to think and say, let's deep dive from 35,000 feet. What I mean by 35,000 feet is when you say, hey, I'm trying to solve cyber. Okay, that's good, but that's way too high. I'm trying to solve the SDLC problem. That's good, but that's way too high. We have to little bit deep dive. Let's come to 10,000 feet. The 10,000 feet is where the design is happening. You're designing and deciding, okay, this is how we are going to do it. And this is a flow of the system, how it's going to happen. So you have to ask your question, what do we think? How do we solve? So you have to be like a cyber engineer. I know a lot of the organizations may not have a dedicated cyber team or may not have a dedicated ISO team or an SDLC team or a compliance team, but that's okay. You can put yourself in their shoes. Like, if I were a cyber engineer, what will I be looking for? What are the areas I'll be looking to solve? What are the ways I'll try to block some of the code from getting into production system? Because it's too late once it goes on production system, because the time and the cost to get that rectified is huge. Because during the time, you won't be able to do any feature development. The teams will be concentrating on fixing those vulnerabilities, pushing the new code in, making sure that the old code, which has the vulnerability, has been cleaned up from the production system. So I would suggest, before you jump onto all these fancy things and start implementing, take a step back and see what I'm going to solve. What are the data I have? What if I were a cyber, what will I be thinking? If I was looking from the SDLC point of view, what I'll be looking for. If I'm looking from a compliance point of view, what I'll be looking for. If I'm looking from an ISO standpoint, information security department, what will I do for? If you're thinking about audit, sometimes audit, we think, oh, it's just internal audit. There's also external audits. We have to see what data will they be looking for from the pipeline. If I push a code from my development environment to production, you must have gone through different stages. So when they come to audit, what are some of the data they'll be looking for? So you have to brainstorm all of these things before you try to solve. So that way, you're not just talking too high, but you're coming a little bit deep. That's some of the things we in Capital One went through. Okay, we want to solve, because we in Capital, we take security very seriously. We want to make sure that when the code is pushed to prod, we don't have any critical vulnerabilities in the code. We want to stop from those type of code going into prod. So that's what we have to do. So I suggest you have to think like the cyber. You have to think like an ISO. You have to think like the SDLC. You have to think like compliance. You have to think like audit, and then start moving towards that direction. Now, okay, we say, okay, so what are some of the areas to think about before solving? Next comes, who are your stakeholders? So I was talking more about the cyber. I was talking about audit. I was talking about ISO. I was talking about the SDLC team, the compliance team. All these different teams who will be interested in how we implement the cyber gaps or initiatives. But there is also one important group in this, that is the developer community. If we don't take the developer community along with us in this journey, it will be very difficult for us to implement any solution. It's not about they're being bad or they don't want to do it. It's just that they need to know ahead of time what is going to come. If you can create a roadmap, if you can strategize on when each of the controls is going to be implemented, or if you can let them know what stage it's going to be implemented, and if you take them along with your journey, with you in the journey, it'll be easy for you to implement, because developers are your trainees. They will be your best cheerleaders, because once they understand the need of why we are doing it, once they understand why some of the controls are being implemented, they will definitely jump in and try to solve and help you with solving most of the issues. So the other stakeholders, as I mentioned, the auditors. You may say, hey, I don't deal with auditors. We don't have auditors, but it's good to think like one. We don't have a cybersecurity, think like them. So if you have a team like that, talk to them, understand what they are trying to say, solve, or what they want to look for. So that way, it's not just you are uh, concentrated just on the release engine, where you say, I need to check out the code, I need to do some verification, I need to build the code, I need to deploy in different environments, and I'm pushing the code to prod. Instead of just being a very simple pipeline, you're trying to introduce some controls all along the way. If you're doing a checkout, these are some more things I'll be checking. If I'm building, I'll do certain checks. If I push your code to prod, QA, I'll be doing some checks. If I'm pushing my code to prod, I'll be doing some checks. So you have to go through those checks. You have to think through it. Again, there is a lot of community groups out there who can help. There's a lot of white papers there which you can use and see which one is the best way. How do we implement? There's tons of data. And again, we have conferences like this, the DevOps conferences, where you can get a lot of information. Again, there'll be a lot of information, there are a lot of things you can solve, but think about what makes sense for your organization. Not everything will make sense. Not like even in Caproman, we don't try to solve everything. We don't try to implement everything, because it does not. Sometimes it is not needed for us, but needed for ABC company. It may not be good for us. Maybe it's good for an XYZ company. So you have to decide for your kind of business, for your kind of security, which controls are important for you. Like in the cyber, what are the cyber controls we need? In information security, what type of security you need to have? In the auditing, what type of auditing, what level of auditing you need? So you have to go through all these things. So I talked about what are the problems we are trying to solve, who are the stakeholders, and we also talked about the data and who will be interested. So that doing a little bit deep dive. So I talked about that. Then your question may come up: what is the benefit of doing all this? Why do I have to do this? The lessons we learned in Capital One is when we implement this standards, it is for standardization and automation of our system. That's the greatest benefit you will get from this. That means you know what you're trying to implement. You will be able to centralize the standardization of a control. It's not like you're running around different teams. Hey, you need to implement the standard, and you have to work with 50 teams, 100 teams, 200 teams based on the size of your organization. Or you can say, let me introduce the standard in one place, and every team will be implementing or be using that standard. And it is easy to automate. If you have to make a change in your pipeline, it is easy to make a change in one place and it has been implemented across the team. So you have to think through that. So when I was looking into the standardization and automation, this story came into my mind. The Ford company, all know Ford makes car, and initially during their initial days, I'm talking about early 1900s, they started manufacturing cars. And one of the issues they had is they took a lot of time to build a car, and the cost was really high. And because of the cost was really high, they were not able to sell more cars to the customers. So Ford, what he did is he's like, how do I reduce this cost? How do I standardize the process? So he went on some studies and he started looking into what is the best way to do this? What is the best process to do this? So he was inspired by the continuous flow production methods used by flour mills or the breweries and the canneries, which he saw in Chicago. So he's like, okay, they have a good continuous flow production, and how they are able to standardize and how they're able to automate that and say, okay, he wanted to implement the same in his factories. You see, he took a lesson from a flour mill company. He took a lesson from a brewery and he said, I'm going to implement that in the car production line. So he implemented the continuous flow approach in the plants. So he separated the 84 steps it takes to build a car. And he said each of the steps is going to be done by one individual. That's all they have to do. Just concentrate on one thing and do it best. So he was able to implement that. So the first model they produced, which was the Ford Model T, so they cost initially, before implementing this continuous line process, it used to cost $825. But after automation, after he was able to standardize the process, the cost came down to $260, from $825 to $260. Yes, it's not much now, but during that time, it was a lot of money. So when it reduced to $260, a lot of them were able to buy it. And then the time they took to produce it, it reduced from 12 hours, more than 12 hours, to 1 hour, 33 minutes. Almost 10%, 90% of the work has been reduced. The time has been reduced. So when you introduce standardization and automation, you're decreasing the cost and you're decreasing the time for a code to go into prod. If in our language, if we have to talk about in software language, it's more of CI/CD split. What are the CI/CD split and what are the tools we want to use? If we don't do it, we have to think about what is the risk associated with this. Everybody doing different process, hard to implement any controls, hard to standardize, hard to automate, even hard to know what is going into prod. So you have to be like, okay, what I'm going to do? This is the greatest benefit is you're standardizing the process and you're automating. Like the lesson Ford learned, he implemented that in December 1, 1913. Greatest lesson, and it improved his productivity and decreased his cost. So based on standardization and automation, you're going to say, how am I going to solve this? There's a lot of problems in the organization. How am I going to do it? I will give you a good example. Don't try to solve all the problem at once. Identify areas to fix the problem. Set goals. Set realistic expectations. Set timelines. Set your priorities. When you do the prioritization, you have to see what are some of the quick wins and what are some of the long-term solutions. One step at a time is the key for this. You don't want to solve everything. You don't want to go until I'm going to solve 100 problems, rather than say, hey, I'm going to categorize quick wins and long-term solutions. And in quick wins, these are some of the first items I'm going to solve. In the long term, I'm going to solve this. And when you talk about small wins, you also talk about what are the benefits the organization is going to get. What are the numbers? Provide them numbers with, okay, if you do this much productivity time is being decreased, and you can say this much feature development time is being increasing, so that you're taking the leadership along with you in the journey, as well as you're taking the developer community along with you in the journey. One step at a time. You may say, okay, you're talking about all this cyber, ISO, and all these things. Why do I have to do it? What do I have to solve for everything? Capital One, I'm just talking from Capital One. Capital One is a highly regulated industry. We are a financial bank, so we are regulated by these many organizations. We are across 3 countries, so there is a lot of regulation. So we have to go through all these things. And you may ask, Capital One is a financial institution. You need to go through all this cyber and ISO and audit, internal, external, and everything. But your organization may not be coming under these controls or these level of auditing or these level of compliance. But I will tell you something, it's like, even though you're not regulated, if you have to sell to, say, take for example, Capital one of your products, you have to be compliant with all these things. So you have to take a step back and say, yes, even though we don't need to go through all this checks and balances, if you want to sell to one of those industries where it is highly regulated, it is very easy for you to be recognized because you say, hey, we are already compliant with all those financial needs. We already go through all the cyber needs. We have a very secure product. It will be easy for you to sell your product. So think through that and say, okay, even though I'm not regulated, I'm going to think through that. So the next step, what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, where do I start? Okay, now I'm doing all these things. Where do I start? I just want to give you one example. Is in our organization, the line of business I'm in, for this like Q4, we had just a fun event. I'll say like what's a fun event is we decided, like some of us in the line of business decided, like by end of December, we want to plan for 5 minutes. Yes, 5 minutes we want to plan. So it's hard. So the way we decided is, let's not just start with 5 minutes and say how long we can do. What we decided that if a meeting ends 5 minutes early or 10 minutes early, we'll use that time. Let's start with 30 seconds at a stretch. Like first week, let's do plan for 30 seconds. Second week, we'll do for 1 minute. So keep on increasing the time. So now it's been almost 4 weeks. We can easily do, some of us can easily do 2 minutes plan at a time, but our goal is 5 minutes. So where I'm going with that is, when you do a solution, when you try to solve something, don't go all out and say starts here, ends here, rather than take it slow, stages, like 30-second stages, 30-second gaps. So that way it's easy for them to understand, easy for the leadership to understand, easy for the development community to understand, and it's easy for you to implement that. With all this said, I just want to walk you through how did Capital One approach this challenge. Capital One approached this challenge because Capital One had, like, I don't know the number of pipelines we had internally. There were a lot of pipelines. So we, as a first step, is like, how can we consolidate all these pipelines? So we looked into different pipelines, the capabilities, and chose just one pipeline. So, okay, this is the pipeline you're going to implement, and this is where the controls are going to be implemented. This is where you're going to start automating and standardizing. So that's the first thing we did. Then we said, okay, what are the controls we want to implement? What are the cyber controls? What are the ISO controls? What are the data controls? What are the SDLC controls? What are the compliance, audit? All these things we say, okay, we start analyzing what are the controls we need to implement. And then out of all this data we had, identified the data, after identifying all these controls, we said, what are the appropriate controls in different stages we need to implement? So because we came up with like 50 or 60, I'm just throwing a number, I don't have it in mind. And then we said, okay, we don't need to do all the 50 or 60, we are going to do 20. And then we said, okay, which stages we are going to implement that? So we started going through that. And if you remember, I talked about the quick wins and the long-term wins. So we started going one step at a time. So what are the small wins? What are the big item wins? So that way, we are very clear with the leadership team, what is our full-time goal. So it took us like close to 2.5 years to implement what we decided and where we are now. And the next thing is visibility in the product development. This is where you take the development community with you in the journey. So I'm just going through the approach we took, and then cultural transformation, because when you talk about 100 pipelines to one pipeline, different controls, they need to know what's going on. They need to understand what is the need of that. So those things you need to do. That's how we approach. And then inner sourcing, we encourage inner sourcing because just one team can't implement all these changes. So we invited teams from different lines of business to come and help us. So this excited the development community because they're also part of this big initiative. Documentation, whatever you do, document very good. Everything you do, what the controls, document why you're doing this. If you're implementing in a certain stage, just document why you're doing, so that if new developers come, they will know what they're looking for. Then effective communication, 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 communication. I'll keep on telling that, keep the developers along in the journey. That's our approach we did. So some of the controls we implemented, again, this is what Capital One did. I'm not saying this is what you need to do, but your organization may have its own controls. You can do it, but you need to understand the overall vision is it's not about the controls, it's about making sure you're standardizing and you're automating all that security gaps in your organization. You're closing all those things. So we looked into the open source license violation, we looked into SAST, we looked into DAST, we looked into container vulnerabilities, we looked into infrastructure vulnerabilities. We also looked into SDLCs, as I was talking, the peer reviews. It's the same developer writing the code, is he approving it, is he doing the PR merge? All these things we looked into so that there is no violation on that side. So these are some of the controls we looked into. This may look very high level, but this can cover a lot of the gaps or controls you need in your organization. So I talked about the approach, and I also talked about what are some of the controls we in Capital One took. And then some of the tools we explored during this process. Again, I'm not suggesting this tool or that tool. I'm not suggesting the JFrog. I'm not suggesting GitHub. I'm just giving you some hint on some of the tools Capital One explored so that you can get some idea on what are the controls. Like I talked about an open source, a white source can do that. I talked about container management, a Qualys can do that. So I'm just giving you the controls and some of the tools you can start looking into implementing. Again, these are very powerful controls, and these are powerful tools which can help you to automate that process. So these like white source, JFrog, Qualys, GitHub, X-Ray, Checkmark, these are some of the tools you can use. Again, there may be other tools which you may be interested or you may have already explored. It's absolutely okay with that. My concentration is not on the tools, but I'm just trying to take you through the journey of how you can be successful in what you're trying to implement and how you can take the development community along with your journey. So I talked about the controls Capital One did, the approach we did, some of the tools we explored, and where are we now? Now we have a standardized scanning tools. We have increased the pipeline runs. If I remember right, there's close to 300,000 runs happen in our pipelines each month. So that is a lot of runs, but still we were able to decrease the build times. We didn't increase the build times by introducing so many controls, but we were able to keep it within a certain SLA. And also we were able to centralize all the policies. So if cyber says, hey, I have a policy which needs to be implemented, we are able to do that because all these production deployment is happening through a pipeline. So we were able to easily implement that and easier release decisioning. So if you have to stop a code from production bound, you can easily do it because you have centralized that, and also improved compliance and auditing. So we are here, but if you say, hey, have we done everything? There's still room for us to improve, but what the lessons we learned, what the approach we took, what the controls we explored, the tools we analyzed, all these things took us to this place where we can confidently say now, if we have to implement a control, we know how to do it. If we have to standardize something in the pipeline, we can do it. So we have crossed that canyon and we are now marching towards how can we improve our production runs. So with that, I want to take you back to the important question. The main focus of this presentation, should I move left or right? If you have noticed, I did not talk about whether we did it left or right or center. It is totally up to you. If you think you can implement on the left, it's absolutely fine. If you think you have to implement that control on the right, it's absolutely fine. So my thing here is, do not be stuck with shift left or shift right or something on the terminologies, but concentrate on the controls you want to implement, but concentrate how you're going to standardize, concentrate how you're going to automate. With that decided, then you go into whether you want to shift left or not. So with that, I want to end this session saying, don't be stuck with shift left terminology. That's fancy stuff, but there's more to that. So think about the solution, think about the controls, think about the stakeholders, and think about the standardization and automation, and definitely you'll be able to do better implementation rather than getting stuck in shift left or not. So that's why I said, is shifting left the right way to securing your apps? I'm not saying anything. I'm just leaving that to you. And thank you so much for hearing me out. Again, if you have any questions, definitely you can reach me in LinkedIn. My name is Nimesh Manad. I'm one of the directors. So I'm thankful again. Thank you for listening to this and have a good day.